So our third presenter is Maryam, who just participated in this discussion. You already know her, but I'm gonna read a brief introduction. Maryam Rabi graduated from the HPP program at Cornell in 2018. She has a background in architecture and has worked in the field of heritage conservation in Pakistan since 2010. She was a consulting architect at the Aga Khan Trust for Culture in Pakistan and has worked on award-winning projects such as the conservation of the Shahi Hammam situated in the historic walled city of Lahore. Maryam is currently a managing partner and co-founder at Studio Lahore, a multidisciplinary practice that specializes in architecture, interior, and landscape design, as well as historic preservation. She is also a member of the visiting faculty at Bacon House National University in Lahore, where she teaches conservation and architectural history. Thank you, Maryam, for being with us and presenting your work.
Thank you, Mayar. I'm just going to share my screen. So don't mind me, I'll be fumbling through my notes. But thank you, Mayar. Hi, everyone. I'm Maryam. And as Mayar told you, I graduated from the HPP program in 2018. And today I will be presenting to you what I have been up to since then, what observations I have made, and what challenges I have come across. There will be a lot of pictures, so if you do get bored, at least you'll have something nice to look at on the screen. So, as Mayar mentioned, I rejoined the Aga Khan Trust for Culture in 2018 as a consultant, and my first project was to work on a publication, and which I'm going to talk about in the following slides. I also developed conservation proposals for 3 historic houses in the historic walled city of Lahore. I'm teaching at BNU, and I most recently taught the history of colonial development, focusing on the Indian subcontinent. We discussed politics, social relations, governing, urban policies, and architectural development. In 2020, I also co-founded and am a managing partner of Studio Lahore. We are a multidisciplinary practice that specializes in architecture, interior, and landscape design, as well as historic preservation. So in 2018, the Aga Khan Trust for Culture began working on a high-quality publication on Lahore that documented their work in the city since 2007. But it also shed light on numerous Mughal period heritage properties that are often neglected or forgotten. I was part of the editorial team and was also a contributor. I coordinated with other authors, worked with international photographers, obtained permissions to enter and photograph said properties. I'm going to go through some of the heritage sites that we covered in the book to give you an idea of the vast number of culturally significant properties in Lahore alone, and the nature and content of the publication, basically. I will then discuss some of the challenges that I encountered throughout this process. So Lahore is Pakistan's second largest city. It is the capital of the province of Punjab, and it is the country's cultural heart. It has a known history over a period of more than 2,000 years. Lahore's metropolitan area measures about 505 square kilometers, although a total area of 1,700 square kilometers is affected by urban Lahore in a variety of ways. By the latest count in 2017, the city's population was 11.3 million, ranking 31st among 1,047 cities in the world with a population of 500,000 or more. The Citadel Lahore Fort is situated on the northwest corner of Lahore's historic core, which you can see over here. The walled city is situated northwest of the metropolis, and it covers an approximate area of 2.56 square kilometers. Once a fortified settlement, much of the city's historic fabric evolved during the Mughal era. The city was originally accessed through 13 arched gateways, some of which exist as British period reincarnations. The most recognized landmarks of the historic core include the Lahore Fort, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site since 1981, and the Bachai Mosque. The walled city's intricate labyrinth alleyways and cul-de-sacs consist of a diverse array of spectacular monuments, architecturally and historically significant buildings, public spaces, residential areas, as well as bazaars. So this is an aerial photograph of the Bachai Mosque and the densely populated walled city in the background. In 1981, the Lahore Fort Precinct and its 21 surviving monuments were inscribed by UNESCO as a World Heritage Site, surrounded by an inner fortification wall encircling approximately 19.5 hectares of royal structures and formal gardens. The fort was largely built and developed in its current configuration between 1556 and 1707 by 4 Mughal emperors, namely Akbar, Jahangir, Shah Jahan, and Aurangzeb. After which it was extensively modified during the Sikh and British periods. This is a drawing of the Lahore Fort. It was documented using an electronic distance measurement device, and it lists all the monuments contained within the Lahore Fort complex, some of which we will see in the following slides. So this is the Bachai Mosque. It was constructed by the Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb between 1671 and 1673. The mosque is an important example of Mughal architecture with an exterior that is decorated with carved red sandstone with marble inlay. It remains the largest mosque of the Mughal era and is the second largest mosque in Pakistan. After the fall of the Mughal Empire, the mosque was used as a garrison by the Sikh Empire and the British Empire. This is Hazuri Bagh, which is a garden basically within the Lahore Fort. And in the center of the garden stands the Hazuri Bagh Pavilion, which you can see on the extreme left image. It was built by Ranjit Singh in 1818, and it consists of elegantly carved marble details and a mirrored ceiling. So the Diwan-e-Khas, or also known as the Hall of Private Audiences, served as a hall where the emperor would attend to matters of the state and where courtiers and state guests were received. The Kala Burj, also known as Black Pavilion, is the most significant of the Jahangir era additions to the Lahore Fort. It consists of vaulted ceilings in the pavilion, which feature paintings in a European influenced style of angels. These are structures that are contained in the western quarter of the Lahore Fort. Again, you can see a lot of intricate details, fresco work. So the Nau Lakha Pavilion was built in 1633 during the Shah Jahan period and is made of prominent white marble and is known for its distinctive curvilinear roof. The Nau Lakha Pavilion served as a personal chamber and is located in the northern section of the fort. The structure was originally inlaid with precious and semi-precious stones. The Sheesh Mahal, also known as the Palace of Mirrors, was constructed under the reign of Mughal Emperor Shah Jahan in 1631 to 32. The ornate white marble pavilion's walls are decorated with frescoes and are inlaid with pietra dura and complex mirror work. The Lahore Fort picture wall is one of the principal features of the UNESCO World Heritage Site. It is about 1,500 feet long with an average height of about 50 feet and forms the northern and western facade of the Lahore Fort, and it also forms the original entrance to the fort. It was built approximately 400 years ago, and it is among some of the most exquisite features of the Lahore Fort and is one of the largest murals in the world. Parts of the wall are extensively embellished in cut brickwork, cut glaze tile mosaic work, filigree work, and painted lime plaster. The wall consists of an array of exquisitely decorated recessed panels, and the eaves and brackets of pavilions and other rooftop structures are carved in sandstone and marble work inlaid with semi-precious stones. So the Aghan Trust for Culture has also been engaged in the conservation of the picture wall since 2016. The publication includes information about the process of its conservation, as you can see in these images. It includes cleaning processes, techniques, conservation principles, including guidelines for reconstruction, where, how, to what extent. So the conservation process also included chemical analyses, creating prototypes for reconstructed elements, and documentation through hand drawings, photography, and electronic distance measurement device. So the Khan was also involved in a pilot project since 2007. This basically drawing, it shows you the Shahi Guzarga, also known as the Royal Trail. It consists of the route starting from Delhi Gate and ending at the Lahore Fort. The projects basically included facade improvement, infrastructure upgradation, conservation of select monuments such as the Shahi Hammam and the Wazir Khan Mosque, which we will be looking at in the following slides. These are photographs of the Delhi Gate and the markets along this Royal Trail. The Shahi Hammam on this trail, it is a 17th century bathhouse. It was conserved by the Khan Trust and it won the UNESCO Asia Pacific Award for Heritage Conservation in 2014. It is now a museum where archaeological findings have been preserved, and in some cases they have been displayed, as you can see in the central image. This is the Dinanath well. It is a Sikh period well, also conserved by the Khan Trust for Culture and located along the same route. So this is the Wazir Khan Chowk. This is basically a reclaimed public space. This entire space was basically filled with encroachments, and there was a very lengthy social mobilization process in order to reclaim the space. Now it is used for events such as Qawwalis, which is a form of Sufi singing. These are images of the Wazir Khan Mosque, which is a 17th century structure, and it is currently being conserved by the Khan Trust for Culture. However, it is part of a much larger conservation plan for the area, which will continue till 2023 at least. Another mosque on the Royal Trail, this is called Suneri Mosque, and it is basically known for its golden dome. So apart from these buildings, which the Khan is either currently working to conserve or has already conserved, there are many other less known heritage sites throughout the walled city that also deserve attention. This is gardens such as the Greater Iqbal Park, which was recently redeveloped and consists of Pakistan's celebrated national monument called Minar-e-Pakistan. Shalimar Gardens, a 17th century terraced garden. This is the Nihal Singh Haveli, which is basically a Sikh era mid-19th century structure. It currently serves as a school. Yusuf Salli's Haveli. Haveli is basically a residential building that consists of a central courtyard. While the previous Haveli that I showed you now serves as a girls' school, this Haveli is still a residential property, and it is still owned by the same person, Yusuf Salli and his family. This is the Samadhi of Ranjit Singh, which is an 18th century building that houses the funerary urns of the Sikh ruler Ranjit Singh. It is located adjacent to the Lahore Fort and the Bachai Mosque. Cypress Tomb, known for this beautiful cypress imagery. This is another Mughal period structure. As you can see, there is a metro track that was constructed adjacent to it, despite people protesting and there being several stay orders. I can only imagine how much damage the construction of this metro track must have done to the structural stability of the monument. So moving outside of the walled city and looking at Greater Lahore, we have many more historically and culturally significant sites. This map was created for the publication, and it identifies and locates these sites. Hiran Minar, which is basically a Mughal period hunting reserve. You have Mughal Emperor Jahangir's tomb. The Sheikhupura fort, which you can see is in a very bad condition. It's in a state of ruin, but it still consists of some very exquisite fresco work. So So the publication also includes a lot of pictures and information pertaining to the different kinds of crafts and businesses located in the walled city. You can see these pictures. The picture on the left is of a person who is putting together a charpai, which is kind of a traditional bed. So he's kind of weaving the threads in. The central image is basically a woman shopping in one of the alleyways for utensils. And then the image on the right is a person selling tobacco. So a lot of street life. The image on the left, again, a very happy person selling his handmade tablas, a traditional musical instrument. The central image, a person who is making kussas, that again is a traditional footwear. And then the person on the right is selling some traditional, authentic street food, Pakistani street food. So now I want to talk a little bit about the existing legal framework through which these sites are managed and theoretically protected. This is a drawing of the Lahore Fort complex and the various agencies that have control over it. You can see that, there's the Walled City of Lahore Authority, Federal Department of Archaeology, Punjab Archaeology Department, Evacuee Trust, Parks and Horticulture, Awqaf, Punjab Rangers. There's so many people that are just responsible for this small area. So excuse me. World Heritage Sites are obviously bound by UNESCO stipulations, but at a national level, we have the Antiquities Act of 1975, which was amended in 2012, where the control of sites located in the Punjab province was handed over to the Punjab government, as opposed to earlier when it was under the federal government's control. In 2012, the Walled City of Lahore Authority Act was also passed, which basically created the Walled City of Lahore Authority, which now has control of all the properties and any future development in the Walled City of Lahore. The Archaeology Department, as I mentioned before, and the Awqaf Department are, still part of that fabric because so any historic properties that have archaeological value, the archaeology department will be overseeing or maintaining that property. And then you also have the Awqaf department, which is involved in buildings and structures that are of a religious nature. So there's a lot of overlapping of different government agencies that are required to work together, but unfortunately, they are unable to do that. They refuse to share information and they refuse to give up control, which contributes to the mismanagement of these sites. And in some cases, they also instigate one another. So, for example, for this book, I needed permissions to photograph these sites, but in many cases, I was either denied or only allowed to photograph these sites under strict supervision. They are public properties, but as a citizen of Pakistan, I cannot enter them. Government officials do not want photographs of their mismanagement basically to get out. And so that is why they kind of regulate who gets to come into these properties and who doesn't. We were only able to get these permits because we were working in partnership with the Walled City of Lahore Authority, which, as I mentioned earlier, is a government agency. So they made that process a lot easier, but it was still a very lengthy process and it required multiple permits for myself, for my team, for my photographers, especially because they were foreigners. And basically drone photography was strictly prohibited and it was only allowed in 1 or 2 select sites. So the next project that I worked on with the Aga Khan was basically the rehabilitation of 3 British period historic houses that basically are located in the Wazir Khan Chowk. And they are being rehabilitated to serve as restaurants. The project was funded by a USAID grant. These are just some drawings that I'm going to show you just so you have an idea of the process. The drawing on the left-hand side is basically of the elevation of one of the buildings in its existing condition. And the image on the right is the proposed elevation. Again, the drawing on the left is a cross section of the building in its existing condition. So it kind of highlights where the electric cables are, what kind of cracks there are, any structural instability, any loss of certain architectural elements. And so the drawing on the right is a proposed section with all of those conservation proposals incorporated. So these are just a few before and after pictures that I thought would be interesting for all of you. The pictures on the left are basically the before intervention, the existing condition of the building, and then the picture on the right is after conservation. The stairways, fireplaces, electrical wires. So some of the wooden elements had to they were so decayed that they had to be completely replaced. The photograph on the right-hand side, this rooftop structure had to be reconstructed altogether because it was in very, very bad shape. More images. I'm sorry for this picture, it's a little blurred, but it gives you an idea of what the existing condition of the building was. And then on the right, what it looks like now after conservation. Again, before and after of another one of those buildings. And so in 2020, I founded Studio Lahore, which is a multidisciplinary studio with my friend Hira. We know each other since architecture school, and it's been very fun working with her so far. We specialize basically in architecture, interior and landscape design, as well as historic preservation. I'm just going to go through some of the recent projects that we've done. This doesn't really have to do anything with historic preservation, but just to give you an idea of the kind of work that we do. We basically did the interior design and the rooftop design of the Coca-Cola headquarters in Lahore. And for the rooftop, our concept was basically centered around a world without waste. So we proposed creating furniture that reused the plastic crates, salvaged wood, etc. And we also thought about, the waiting areas, especially in the office spaces, to have modular furniture, which would ensure consistency and flexibility. So these are just a few images. This is the waiting area. You can see the modular furniture. We had to work with a few existing elements, obviously. The rooftop, where we've reused crates and salvaged wood. So this is another project that we did. It's located in Islamabad. It's called the Pastela Vista restaurant. And basically the clients in this case wanted something very contemporary, but also a little bit industrial. This is the outdoor seating arrangement, a few internal visual images to show you the entrance or the pizza counter or some private nooks. This is the first floor. So moving on, back to preservation, Studio Lahore began working on the Noor Mahel Museum in Bahavalpur. So the Noor Mahel Museum, the Noor Mahel building actually is basically owned by the Department of Defense, Pakistan's Department of Defense. It is located in Bahavalpur, Punjab. It was built in 1875 on neoclassical lines by Nawab Sadiq Muhammad Khan Abbasi IV. The palace was designed by Mr. Hinan, an Englishman who was the state engineer at the time. It covers an area of about 44,600 square feet. It has 32 rooms, including 4 in the basement, 6 verandas, and 5 domes. In 1956, basically, when the Bahavalpur state was merged into Pakistan, the building was taken over by the Awqaf department. And the palace was leased to the Department of Defense in 1971. And in 1997, basically, the Pakistan Department of Defense purchased it. The building was declared a protected monument in September 2001 by the government of Pakistan's Department of Archaeology. So this is just a very schematic kind of master plan, you could call, in a lot of ways. This project basically, while it was a museum, it was functioning as a museum before we started with the project. It was in very kind of bad shape, you could say, because the client did not know what kind of artifacts to display, what kind of, description is going to go with it, what other essential spaces are required for any given museum. So we kind of, came in, we proposed how this museum is supposed to function. We looked into the artifacts, we created catalogs, we looked into their history, we selected which artifacts should go where, what are the different galleries that the museum is going to consist of. There's going to be a reception, there needs to be a museum shop. So basically, this is just a kind of a schematic drawing that shows all of the different spaces that we had proposed to the client. Just a few 3D visuals. This is the reception or information room. This is the proposed museum shop. They do look a little new because these were new constructions. They were not part of the historic fabric of the building. So we wanted it to be a little clean and modern while not very overpowering. So this is inside the building, one of the rooms. The client wanted this sort of media gallery because they wanted to develop a sort of documentary that they wanted to show to visitors. And so this room kind of, consists of a lot of media, a lot of screens, interactive for people to come, to sit, to watch, to view themselves as well. This is one of the main halls in the building. It's called the Coronation Hall. We kind of, studied a lot of the historic pictures of this particular room and, proposed interventions according to those historic pictures and the evidence that we found. So we also developed a brand for the museum because that's very important, and museums have the potential to become iconic in a lot of ways. So the first step to do that was to actually create a brand. So there was a lot of graphic design work as well that was being done alongside. We also developed a website for them, which you can see on the right-hand side. So we also developed tickets, which included basically what type of ticket it would be, the pricing and the number of persons per ticket, serial number, barcode, contact details, etc. And there were also different types of tickets. So you could either get a single pass or a family pass or a student pass or a 6-month single pass or a 6-month double pass. These were all things that the client really liked. But unfortunately, we had some major disagreements with the client, so we had to amicably part ways mid-project. We did provide them with a master plan for the museum, and we hope that they follow it wherever they can. Our basically disagreements were based, not particularly this client or this project. This is just generally speaking, issues such as air conditioning, like I mentioned before. If you want air conditioning in every room, that is something, if the client wants it, sometimes they would be very stubborn and they want what they want. So they don't care if, that results in the building's destruction or a lot of damage to the building. And that is one problem. Another problem, an example that I'm giving is basically, for example, for this museum specifically, we needed a new electrical system because when this building was built, there was no electricity. So now if it is to function as a museum, it needs an entirely new electrical system with new distribution boards, with new breakers, so on and so forth. So we worked with closely with a lot of consultants for this project. But just generally speaking, in historic preservation projects, the thing is that because those wires are exposed, and they are, even though they can be integrated into the design of the building in very nice ways to become a part of the design, generally people don't like seeing that stuff. They don't like seeing exposed wires. They don't like it when rooms are not there's no temperature control in them. So there's a lot of things. And I think that, these, in order to kind of decide what should happen to a historic building, there needs to be some kind of policies, some kind of guidelines that are enforced legally as well, because what should happen to a historic building should not be a client's or your personal choice. It should be something that is dictated by law, what you can do in certain situations and what you can't do. So in conclusion, cultural heritage laws in Pakistan are archaic. They need to be amended and upgraded to include, the needs of today's society, and to ensure that historic buildings are integrated into the built environment and they are brought back into use, and that people are excited by them. There is a general lack of law enforcement, which is why a lot of encroachments take place. And it's very difficult to navigate through these projects. Like I mentioned before, that there's an inability of government agencies to work together. There are departmental insecurities, lack of funding and proper resources, which also includes expertise. And then the general perception of conservation in Pakistan, that, a historic building should look new, and a building that after a conservation process, it should not look like it has aged. So there's a tendency to overconserve, like I've mentioned before, and that often results in, tearing apart the building and its different historic elements and reconstructing them, which I think the building kind of loses its value in that process. And it is something that, people or the general public in Pakistan needs to be educated about. And then another perception of conservation in Pakistan is that, when we talk about rehabilitating historic buildings and kind of adapting them to new uses, people think that, historic buildings should either serve as museums or they should be leased out to restaurants. Historic buildings can do a lot more than just those two things. And that is also another way for them to be integrated into the surrounding built environment by bringing them into use and by adapting them into new uses that are specific to the needs of that given community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maryam. This was great. You've done lots of great work. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Awesome. Any questions from the audience?
Yeah, Mike. Anybody can go.
Michael, go ahead, please.
I'm curious whether the museum that you're working on has a children's program, in that many places, including Pakistan, the museum world is where you get a modest amount of sensitivity to preservation questions. And the recognition that parents have in going to a museum is transferred, the cultural sensitivity is transferred to the children. So I'm kind of curious to the degree, and this seems to be a major museum, so there could be a museum network or a network of museums in the area that could benefit for what would be heritage education for kids.
Absolutely, Professor Tomlin. We're not working on that project now, but whatever we did propose to them, that did include a program for children. Actually, we were developing a museum mascot for children, and we were thinking of kind of including that in various galleries and, kind of making an interactive space for them as well, where they can engage with the historic stories that the museum had to kind of, talk about, and kind of to create a space where children actually enjoy history. It was something that we were working on, although I don't know if they've made any progress on it. I do know that they've switched up the website that we created for them a little bit. So The rest, I guess, is up to the clients. That's about as much as we can do. But yes, I completely agree. It is very important to kind of bring in children into this, platform so that they understand from a very young age how important history is, and they learn to enjoy it instead of running away from it.
Melissa, do you want to go next?
Melissa, you can, yeah.
Oh, hi. So my question was just around the conversation, the issues you were talking about with respect to different kinds of organizations working together on projects like the Walled City, right? And you were talking about how there's just not this exchange of information, that there's a lot of issues working together, that doesn't really happen. I just wasn't sure if there was any way that you could make inroads with other heritage professionals that were in a different department that might be able to work, to have kind of the same values and the same interests, and they might want to work with you on the kinds of projects that you're working on. So I guess I was asking, how about the archaeologists? Are they gonna play nice or no?
Well, I wish they wanted to, Melissa, honestly. Like I mentioned before, like historic preservation professionals are very, very few in Pakistan. So a lot of these departments, whether it's the archaeology department or whether it's, some other government agency, they usually have people working as directors and deputy directors in conservation without actually having any background or expertise in conservation. So like I mentioned before in the roundtable discussion as well, while the goals of all of these people might be the same, their motivations are very different. So government officials are motivated by very different things as opposed to, private agencies, for example. So, I mean, it's a constant struggle. It's a constant battle, because if you want to do a good job, you kind of have to, sometimes play by their rules and, just accept few of their terms and then hope that they accept some of your terms as well. But no, there are very few people who, would sit down and want to work together, want to share information, want to do a good job. Unfortunately, that just is the case.
Thank you. Kamalika has a question. Go ahead, Kamalika.
Thanks, Maryam. It was great to see your work and know about preservation, especially in the context of the World City. Of course, there's so many significant overlaps in the way preservation works in your country and ours, and of course, the shared cultural heritage between the two. I had my question related to, so you spoke about how primarily the funding for preservation comes through or is funneled through international organizations who are working there, which has enabled a lot of this to be preserved. So I wanted to know, outside of this international funding, are there any kind of financial tools, mechanisms, and incentives which are there, which encourages private property owners or others who want to independently take on conservation outside the ambit of large internationally funded projects? And so what would that be? Or yeah.
Right. Thank you, Kamalika. No, unfortunately, funding for such projects is very, very, very scarce and very hard to get a hold of. NGOs such as the Akhan, and I think there's probably one or two other people who work in conservation in Pakistan. Funding either comes mostly from international donors, or in some cases, at least in Punjab, the government has started to allocate funds towards the preservation of historic properties in the province of Punjab. But unfortunately, that with government funds, it's a very different process, especially if the control of how that spending is going to happen is with government officials. There's a lot more chance for, corruption to happen, a lot more chance for, third parties to get in and take away those funds. And so, the entirety of those funds does not go into the preservation project. That is just how unfortunate it is. Apart from that, privately, no. I mean, I keep hearing these amazing things in India that, you know, for example, the Tata Group donates so much money to preservation projects as well. Unfortunately, in Pakistan, that is not the case. You do not have private individuals or agencies donating to such causes. It is still a very kind of new concept in Pakistan, and there are very few professionals, very few expertise in this country. But I think, yes, progress is happening, although it's very, very slow. Before 2012, there wasn't even any Walled City of Lahore Authority, which, you know, is so important because you need a government agency that is specifically built to look after the historic walled city, the historic core of the city. And you can't have all of these other agencies fighting over it. But, you know, there still needs to be a lot of work that these agencies need to do in order to work together. I don't know how that is supposed to happen because there is so much conflict, and, you know, each historic property usually have like 3 or 4 government agencies overlooking it. And so there's just a lot of departmental insecurity as well. So I'm sorry, I'm kind of got off topic, but as far as funding is concerned, unfortunately, there isn't a lot of funding available out there. It's mostly international donors. And now the government has started to give some money for these projects, but you don't know where that money is going to go, eventually end up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Andy has a comment. Andy, you want to say your comment?
Thanks, Andy.
Hi. Sorry, I turned my camera off because I need to eat. But I was just wanted to say thank you. I enjoyed the presentation, and if people were interested in reading your high quality publication, it is available on Sahara. If you're for a nominal fee, you can become a member of the Society of Architectural Historians, SAH.org, and I don't work for them, but sorry, that's my clock. They do have a wealth of information and literature from all around the world as it relates to architecture. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. You can actually also download the publication from archnet.com. I can send a link quickly over here for everybody to kind of go. You have a lot of other interesting articles as well on ArchNet, so feel free to explore.
Thank you. Ritika, you want to ask your question?
Yeah, I have a general question to all the alumni here and anybody who wish to answer this. There has been a issue that I have been facing when I've been working with modern heritage. The question of the stakeholders when they worry about the life of the building after the restoration is like how long the building is going to last once the building has been restored, and you know their unrealistic expectation that they don't have to worry about conserving the building again once they have invested, or they don't have to worry about the maintenance, because this is something that I have encountered here in India. So how do we address such issues? So, I mean, anybody can answer, so.
I'm just trying to get your question.
I personally think that it really depends on the maintenance and the nature of the conservation work. It really depends on the project. It's not like just one answer to every project. But without maintenance, any restoration or rehabilitation project not gonna last much. That's my opinion.
Absolutely, and I would just like to add to that. Thanks, Mayar. I think that, you know, these projects, I often tell people that I work with that, you know, if you bring a building into use, because you have so many historic buildings that are abandoned, at least in Lahore, if you bring them into use, they're still going to be in better condition than they are right now. Because as long as a building is in use, there is some small maintenance happening here and there. Yes, of course, in order for a building to last much longer than that, you do need proper maintenance, which at least in the context of Pakistan, I don't know if that is possible, because even some of the best projects that we have done are continuing to kind of, return to a poor state because of lack of maintenance, even though these properties are generating money, which should essentially go into their maintenance. But, with our other larger issues, bureaucracy and all of these other third parties that are involved in, handling the money that is generated in these properties, very few resources are actually invested into the historic building. So that is another struggle.
I would only add, Maryam and Myra, you've both touched on the same issues, but I'm going to reconfigure them. How long is the building going to last, in many senses, has to do with the occupants. Thinking about the nature of the activities of the occupants or not. Because what often happens is the businesses or the residents or the occupiers have no sensitivity to what it is the building's future might be or could be or should be, any of those things. In many parts of the world, once again, it's a financialization question from a developer's point of view. The question is the amount of investment is got to be realized in the return to the investors. The return to the investors may be 5 years, 10 years, as the case may be, at which point the investors have been paid off and the owner has the ability to essentially change the property with another use, because the occupants essentially have been priced out. And that's what basically happens in the gentrification cycle in many respects. So there's much more, but I would agree with both Mayar's comment that it depends, and Maryam's point that all of the layers of the solution have to be examined. Good question.
Okay, thank you all very much. I think we had 3 great presentations and conversation. I thank you all for being here. Our next session is at 6:30 Eastern Time, US and Canada. We're gonna have, yes, for Maryam.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're gonna have current student presentations and then 2 more alumni presentations. Hope to see you all later today, or if for anyone tomorrow, I don't know. See you all later. Have a good day.